Welcome everybody to the latest in our series of Ship Management International, webinars, and we're very excited to be able to do this in conjunction with the Maritime Authority of Jamaica. And just as the delegates are starting to come in, a few little housekeeping rules. I will actually say to Hortense, if you'll need to adjust your camera there, you're a little bit transparent, as sometimes happens with the background. But just to the delegates coming in as well, we've got some excellent speakers today and panelists today, and I will be encouraging you to ask questions, send questions in. You'll be able to see at the bottom of the screen there that you have a Q&A. So if you want to send a question in, type in your question and send it on the Q&A, and then I'll receive it. I'll do my best to air the question as well. The debate today should last for about an hour and a quarter, and we should cover a lot of areas. I'm just waiting for Dr. Hortense just to get herself, and maybe if you want to do away with the background. Yeah, this is a problem sometimes when you have the background. So I'm just waiting for Hortense just to sort herself out. Yeah, Hortense, maybe you might just like just to do away with the background. So just go on to the up button on the video, and then just go to no image or whatever. While Dr. Ross-innerarity is trying to deal with that, we'll press ahead. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming in to listen to our debate today. We're talking very much about women in shipping, ocean management, obligation or opportunity. And there'll be a panel discussion to consider women's contribution to the workings of the IMO. And it'll also examine the maritime career opportunities available for those wanting to make a difference. So I'm going to just introduce the speakers. And from my left-hand side, we have Professor Mona Webber, and she's a marine biologist at the University of the West Indies. Mona has over 30 years' experience in research and teaching in Jamaica. She's presently head of the Department of Life Sciences and the James S. Solomon Senior Chair in Environment at the University of the West Indies. She supervises several graduate students in research projects related to coastal ecosystems, mangroves, sea grasses and coral reefs, towards their conservation and restoration of ecosystem services. Her other research interests include emerging regional issues like sargassum seaweed inundation and microplastic pollution. I can't wait for you to tell us all about that, Mona. That's going to be lovely. Thank you. Then we have Vivian Parasram, and she's an accomplished attorney at law with over 25 years of experience, specialising in corporate, environmental and maritime law. She's conducted extensive research in maritime decarbonisation, environmental governance, and the blue economy, contributing meaningfully to regional and global policy dialogues. Serves as the IMO regional coordinator for the Caribbean, where she plays a pivotal role in advancing the International Maritime Organization's strategic objectives across the region. And prior to this role, she spent over 17 years in maritime education, training and research at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, where she was instrumental in establishing innovative academic programs and spearheading the development of the Maritime Technology Cooperation Centre of the Caribbean. Welcome, Vivian, and we look forward to getting your views a little bit later on. I'm very delighted to also welcome Sherice Arman, spent over 25 years of experience in the area of corporate and commercial law. She's currently a partner at the international law firm Maples and Calder on the finance team, and is a co-head of the asset finance practice in the Cayman Islands and the co-head of the asset finance practice in the Cayman Islands. She's a leader in the asset finance field, in particular shipping and aviation finance. She's the founding president of the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association of the Cayman Islands, director of the London and Amsterdam Trust Company Limited, a member of the Cayman Islands Maritime Shipping Sector Consultative Committee, and the national liaison for the Cayman Islands for the Women of Maritime Association in the Caribbean. So, Sherice, welcome, and look forward to talking to you a little bit later on. We have Dr. Hortense Ross-innerarity. I'm very pleased to see you all nice and clear there, Hortense, which is lovely. Dynamic maritime professional, celebrated for her passion, persistence, purpose, perspective and performance, pride, mentorship and leadership. Started her career in 1985, where she pursued a program of study in marine navigation and cultivated a passion for marine transportation and seaborne trade. Her career took her to the Shipping Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, where she served as a navigation officer. Petro Jam Limited, where she played a pivotal role in the Logistics and Marine Operations Department, supporting the commercial shipping activities. And in 1998, she joined the Port Authority as Jamaica's first female superintendent of pilotage, a position she holds today. And she's a companion member of the Institute of Management Specialists UK and previously held membership with the International Institute of Business Analysts in Canada, United States Association of Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and the International Coach Academy in Australia. Hortense, thank you very much indeed. And then we have Dr. Evette Smith-Johnson, who's president of the Governing Council of the Women in Maritime Association of the Caribbean, WEMAC. And in this capacity, she is strategic lead for the WEMAC mission of transforming the maritime industry through the development and participation of women in the sector within the Caribbean. She's a veteran educator and seasoned maritime education and training professional, director of the School of Graduate Studies and Research at the Caribbean Maritime University. And her passion is the development of people through education, training, and mentorship. And she enjoys volunteering to projects that promote the development and education of young people. So welcome, Evette, as well, and look forward to hearing your views and your comments. Just to reiterate before we start with the first question, just to the delegates, any questions you have, whiz them through on the Q&A, and we'll look forward to hearing and to be able to hear those as well. So everybody off mute. Hortense, if you can go off mute, that'd be excellent. Just reading the first question. My name is Sean Maloney. Just to introduce myself, I'm CEO of Elaborate Communications. I'm also publisher of Ship Management International, the main ship owning ship management magazine for the industry. So very pleased to see you all today and talk to you all today as well. So really the first question, and I suppose really, Mona, I'm going to start with you, since you're top left of my screen, and that's great. I'm very much directed to the area of marine biologists, because I know you're not involved in the IMO, but very much on the marine biologist side. Talk to me about the role that women play within that sector and, the challenges and opportunities that you're facing there. A couple of minutes, give me your views.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sean. It's been a long time now since women have had any challenges in terms of becoming marine biologists or joining areas of marine research in which they have interest. We are seeing huge numbers of women, the proportion of graduates and the proportion of women in our classes in my marine biology major far outnumbers the men. And so the opportunities for being educated and for becoming a marine researcher are great. 2/3 of my class consistently are women. Their ability to move on to the next phase of their careers, either in research or job opportunities, those opportunities have been increasing over the years. I really am pleased to see our young women taking their place, in this area.
But why is it happening like that within marine biology? What's the sort of catalyst for that, would you say, in your sector?
I think the ratios of persons entering the university, the ratios of persons being interested in higher education are trending towards females. In the engineering department, in the physics department, you may have a balance, equal numbers, but certainly in the marine biology and the biology disciplines, the women outnumber the men by far.
And is that just because of an interest in that particular line of work? Is it being pushed in any way in the schools, or?
It is, but it's being pushed equally to both genders. I mean, I see now we have a strong marine biology introductory program where the youngest, the primary levels will visit the marine labs and get exposed to the importance of managing our seas, especially for us in the small island developing states, as we love to say. And so more and more, I'm seeing students having an interest in marine biology as a career. And the proportions, the females outnumber the males as you get our intake.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll develop some of the lines a little bit further into the discussion. Vivian, let me come on to you. And really, with your work there as IMO regional coordinator for the Caribbean, when you look at the role that women play in formulating in the workings of the IMO, can you give us a bit of an insight into how important it is and the current state of affairs on that as far as the IMO is concerned?
Well, the IMO has been very progressive in terms of, for decades, in terms of progressing women in maritime. Their activities can span programs, contracts, scholarships, networks. They've been instrumental in pushing for all of it. And I know there's instruction, for example, directly from the Secretary General, that panelists are actually not allowed to accept being part of a panel discussion if there isn't female representation on the panel. Their programs have included things like the establishment of the Women in Maritime Associations across the world. They have scholarships going into the International Maritime Law Institute, as well as the World Maritime University, for PhDs and master's programs that are specifically targeted, and a percentage of those scholarships have been earmarked for female participation. In terms of their conferences and workshops as well, wherever the IMO is sponsoring a workshop or a conference, there is also a mandate that at least one of the participants must be female. So that is increasingly being more and more enforced. And even in terms of the contracts that they award for implementation of projects within particular regions, those contracts are also requiring that the service providers implement gender action plans and report and monitor the inclusion of women in their workshops and their capacity building activities. So the IMO has been very, very progressive in, and I myself, I was a beneficiary of an IMO fellowship way back in 1999. I got my scholarship to pursue international maritime law at IMLE. So, it's been decades of inclusion. But having said that, I just want to reflect on the contributions of Prof. Weber, because, I really can't ignore my background in terms of maritime education and training. What we see is a stark contrast. We see significant inclusion and subscription by women in the biology and the ecology studies, etc. But when it comes to navigation and marine engineering, and even the nautical sciences and maritime operations, there is a stark contrast. You struggle to get 20% participation, because in my view, the opportunities of the maritime industry are still a best kept secret for Caribbean nationals, and even more so with respect to women. So you struggle to get an attraction and to being a part of the maritime industry because there isn't sufficient knowledge. You still find the premium candidates still is subscribing to the traditional professions of law and medicine and engineering, but there isn't an understanding of the opportunities in the maritime sector. And, when it comes to even progressive inclusion of women in the maritime sector, I've seen the opportunities where their companies have come to us wanting to include female cadets and female engineers and engineering cadets. We don't have them, so there is, a need to communicate the opportunities in the sector. And I think that is something for everyone in the sector to educate about the opportunities. So I'm grateful to the Maritime Authority of Jamaica for having webinars of this nature to progress the education of the opportunities in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but would you just to sort of develop a little bit what you just said there? Do you think shipping is the best kept secret? Full stop. It does an amazing job, and still year after year we talk about a potential shortage of competent seafarers. The real need to reach out and to attract in. And now, as we look into an industry that is looking to innovate and digitize and become more progressive, what are we doing to attract the young of tomorrow and of the future into an industry? So without touching particularly on the particular question there, but do you think shipping has got an issue here in rebranding itself and selling what is a great career to young people? Full stop.
Well, I think it's not necessarily just shipping, because the shipping companies are thriving and will continue to explore the opportunities. But in terms of the talent management, I think our ministries and our governments need to do more in terms of communicating the opportunities and attracting talent to the industry. The shipping companies, from my observation, will continue to harness the best available talent based on, market analytics. They will go after the best if they can pay for the best. But in terms of a country and us capitalizing on the opportunities that are available to the maritime industry, I think there's a room for a lot of partnerships between the public sector and the private sector to expand knowledge in terms of the maritime industry and what it really is. And, I think in terms of the education and the outreach, in my experience, a lot of the maritime education and training centers are understaffed because they themselves are struggling to secure the talent. So expecting those staff to man the classrooms and be your marketing executives is a bit much. So I think this is where industry and government and the IMO can play a significant role in expanding that outreach.
Brilliant, Vivian. Thank you very much. And we'll come and touch on a few of these areas later on in the discussion. Sherice, let me come on to you, if I may. Just really looking at that first point there, the important role that women can play. We talk about formulating the workings of the IMO, but also I think, you play a big role within WISTA itself, and WISTA is a great organisation and has been doing a lot of, excellent work, in really getting people to understand that you've got to open shipping up to women in as a career. What are your thoughts on the challenges and the opportunities ahead there, and actually help women helping to actually formulate the way the industry is working as well as the IMO? What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is that women in the maritime industry should be certainly seen as an opportunity and not a challenge. Be seen as an opportunity and not an obligation. I think there are so many barriers, and I think both Professor Weber and Vivian have both touched on it. Many of the women who are in the maritime industry have fallen into it. They didn't start off, they didn't plan to be in this career. They happen to fall into it. And I think the industry, although we are islands in the Caribbean, most of the islands, we import probably more than, certainly in Cayman, more than 97% of everything we consume. The shipping industry plays a huge role in our country and in the development, both economic and social, but it's just it's silent. And this is the point I think Vivian is making. It's a silent industry. We're not going out and saying to our young people, here are the careers that are available to you. You can make a viable career out of the maritime industry. The people who come into the industry are fallen into almost unplanned. How did I become a maritime lawyer? I fell into it.
Yeah.
To become a maritime lawyer, I happened to be practicing under a gentleman who was passionate about maritime. And that passion has passed on to me. And you'll find that people in the maritime industry, just like in the aviation industry, when the bug bites you, you become very passionate about it. And you want to develop young people in this space. I mean, Professor Weber talked about the prominence of and the number of women in the industry. Even when I went to UAE 30 years ago, more than 60%, and the statistics will show, more than 60% of the classes are made up of women. What the challenges we're seeing is they're not actually making it to the senior levels within the industry. And so they are not then helping with training, with mentorship. And I think that's the way to get more women involved, early education and awareness. Showing them where the careers are, getting them involved in STEM education, offering scholarships. Vivian talked about the fact that she was a beneficiary of a scholarship. Offering the scholarships, offering this financial support, offering mentorship and networking, like what WISTA does, involving, inclusive training and development, and also being supportive within the workplace. Because what's actually happening is that women are afraid to aspire to senior leadership positions because they want to get married, they want to have families, there's a whole social network that needs to come around and provide support to women and encourage them to go after senior roles in industries and in their companies. They're afraid. They're afraid to do it because they feel like socially they're being held back because they are expected to play other roles within the family and within the communities as well.
So you raised some valid points there about their ability to women's ability to progress throughout the industry, but you also talk about how you fell into it. And we all fell into shipping. I did the same. I went into media and into journalism, and then suddenly I applied for a job in a shipping magazine, had no idea what all that meant, and then 40 years later I'm still here. But shipping has a role to play in actually selling itself and saying to, the community at large, come into the industry. We need people like you, and and the young of the future as well. I mean, what can shipping do more, do you think, Sherice, to actually ensure more people fall into it, as we have done, and thankfully we have?
Education, outreach. We are very good at talking amongst ourselves about what we do. We all understand really well what WEMAC does, what WISTA does, what the IMO does, but we're not very good about going out into our communities and really showing what we do and having our communities understand the importance that shipping plays within the community. Many of the Caribbean islands depend very heavily on cruise tourism, for example, but it's almost invisible. The role that these industries play really gets lost, and I think it's education. I think if we could embark as an area on some kind of education of the community, here's the role, here's the value, and here are the opportunities, not just educational opportunities, but real jobs, types of jobs that are available. People just have no idea.
Let me bring you in, and lovely to see you again. And we've talked before on one of these webinars in the past as well, which is excellent. Thank you. Now, you're passionate about developing people through education, training, and mentorship. Do you want to take up a little bit about what Sherice was just saying now there, where what shipping really needs to do to really encourage people into the industry, and more women into the industry? And, is it doing enough? Where do you think the blockages are, Evette? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Sean, for the welcome, and thank you for the question. I found it amazing, the line of symmetry that is running through our thoughts. Professor Weber started by telling us that there is no shortage of women in education. And I just heard Vivian say it, in her way, it's a best kept secret, shipping. And so what came to my mind, Sean, is that we do need a good marriage of what we are getting with the numbers in marine biology and the take-up of careers in the shipping business. The truth is, the only place I step away from my colleagues is where Sherice says, it's an opportunity. I believe with all my heart that it's also an obligation, because we now have to make this stop being serendipity. We can't just have people walking. And I am not, this is so beautiful, and forgive me, I'm excited. I am not speaking because you spoke. If I was invited to share with the papers in Jamaica yesterday, and if you take it up and look at what I wrote, I say, how many times have you heard people, wonderful people in their career says, didn't choose this career, chose me? I mean, we have to move away from our careers choosing us. We have to get people to a place where they realize that the gifts that lie within them and the skill set that they bring to the table can be used in ocean governance and in the biggest business in the world. We have to get Mona students to understand that, like a photograph, you are handling one perspective, but we want you to walk around to the other side, the business part of shipping, and see that the ocean is not just a vast creature that keeps us alive in, sustainable blue environment, but that we make our money and we stay alive because this ocean is clean. And we want you to put your knowledge behind the business part of it too, not just, a lot of environmentalists are, people literally throw slurs at them by calling them tree huggers. I don't know what they'll call those who deal with the ocean, but we want the tree huggers on the business side because the money is being made over here. I've had the privilege of seeing ports across the world, except for Africa. I hope I'll get to Africa, Vivian, one of these days. But I've seen the biggest spaces. And if if the oceans aren't working, then we are going to just gel up and die. So we want people and to come over here. And I do agree now with Sherice and Vivian that we need to sell ourselves. We need to get out there and, WEMAC says we want to make women beacons we need to blow our own trumpets. We have come from this place where they say, oh, self-praise is no recommendation. A very, British kind of place. But self-praise is the first recommendation. We need to get up and say, we are awesome. We are doing this and that's why we are alive. Bring the best knowledge over here. Take some of your legal knowledge and do maritime law. We are getting to that space. But how about take some of your knowledge of the ocean to keep shipping alive? We have to get on the road shows. We have to get our television stations and our media, not just dedicated media spaces like this from the MAJ, which is social media, but we need to get the anthem being sold. And what I call it in WEMAC, I got it from a friend, is that we need to develop a maritime conscience and consciousness, because we are washed by these oceans, yet the only time we are excited about them is when we go to take a bath in that ocean. We need to understand what the IMO, Vivian, is trying to tell us. Let's keep these spaces alive. Education, activism, and we need to go and win the best in the professions over to the business side of shipping, whether it is leisure, pleasure, whatever it is.
Very inspiring about that. Was excellent. And I think really, but where is the driver going to come from? Where are we going to get that passion, that enthusiasm from? Because if you talk to the politicians, they say that, maritime doesn't buy any votes, and there's no. Let
me run a risk here, because Vivian technically is my boss and a little part of this space. The IMO regulates. It gives us clear thoughts about how we ought to do things. The IMO and the UN has to put some muscle behind legislation. Member states will have to be convinced. I don't know how we'll do that, but we have the power to do it. We need to convince the players that they must legislate what is happening. So we have zero emissions by 2050, but who is legislating this? Where are the watchdogs? Unless somebody is getting a rap on the knuckle, some things are not going to be done. So somehow we have to use the power that, we talk about Gestalt theory, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole has to put some pressure on the sum of its parts. And so from IMO regulations, I like that there will be a fine behind carbon emission, because when money starts to come in, then somebody is going to legislate that so that we pay less money. So as we put a squeeze on it in the spaces, people will feel obligated. We can talk, but there has to be some kind of pressure from the greater spaces so that people legislate. And we can't legislate morality, but we can legislate cooperation. And government has to lead, and that's the truth. A leader has to lead. Leadership is hardship. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Evette. Hortense, can I come on to you, and thank you for being patient as well. Just working my way around the screen there. Just really on our first question, how important a role do women play in helping to formulate the workings of the IMO? But you've heard the answers of everybody else. What are your thoughts and your views, Hortense, on this whole issue of of the role that women play, but also of actually shipping maybe selling itself better as a career, as an industry? What are your thoughts?
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to the esteemed panel. I think I agree in most part with what has been shared. I also agree that we have an obligation. We have an obligation to create opportunities. I have been in the industry. This is my 40th year, and unlike the panelists, I have gone through from the seafaring aspect of it. So I have witnessed over the period the challenges, the evolution, the increased visibility, and I want to say we need more of that. And to get that, the politicians will have to play a role. Leadership matters, as Dr. Johnson just mentioned. Leadership matters. We need to identify the gaps in terms of policy positions, because whilst we have female in different positions within the maritime sector and within the different areas, we have a scarcity in the decision-making process. And that matters. So what we have is a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the maritime space and the rest of society. And that is a gap that we need to bridge to create that wholesome awareness so that priority can be given to matters relating to maritime transportation, maritime administration, cybersecurity, maritime security, education and training, port security. So the whole scheme within the maritime industry, there are several opportunities that are available for women, but we have to have the leaders who will carry that forward. If the decisions are not taken to support initiatives from which young women can benefit and to expand and to explain the different opportunities available within the industry. Because part of the reason, even for seafarers, your training in maritime transportation opens the door to several different aspects of the maritime industry, including port operation and management, including fleet management. Yeah, we're now in the age of technology. There are a lot of opportunities, Internet of Things. So it's for us to identify, to fill that void, that disconnect between the industry players itself and the rest of society. And it must be driven from the top, including government. So we formulate policies that require us to act. And in that way, we will not only see it as our obligation, but we'll be creating opportunities, because that awareness is what will allow the females to make decisions and see the maritime industry as an opportunity for a career path.
So where would that initially come from? Because you talk about this disconnect, and it's a very valid point. Shipping is very fragmented, though, as we know. Okay, and you've got the flag stage, you've got the port stage, you've got the owners, the managers, the port operators, you've got everybody within the whole industry, and they've all got a role to play, but they need to be brought together. Now, you could ideally say that the IMO is a perfect place because there are NGOs there, you've got member states there, but the role of the IMO is in safety and pollution issues. So it's not really there to act as a body to promote shipping globally. So how can we sort of reduce this disconnect issue that we have, Hortense, do you think? It's okay saying governments need to do it in industry, but is it the industry needs to come together? Do we need governments to come together? How can we do it?
I would say, Sean, it is a stakeholder engagement. We need stakeholder engagement because you have, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, the trade aspect of it. But there are several players that come together for shipping to work. And shipping is integral to the growth of any economy. We take a lot of things for granted, not recognizing that the common factor to what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're planning, is the role that shipping plays, the movement of goods for the hospital, for the school, for industry. So it's to bring the stakeholders together and create that awareness. You will hear someone in manufacturing, for example, say, my goods are coming in today. But how did the goods arrive? There's no connection to having the goods into the warehouse and that it arrive at the port via ship and the importance of all that. So I think creating awareness is very important. And then to bring the stakeholders together to show the linkages and the benefits, the supply chain, the logistics, and the transportation connection. And that the biggest part of that actually is the role that the ship play in transporting the goods from one country to the next, from one port to the next. And we all are the beneficiaries. But we have to bring everybody to the table and then sell that mission to the government so that they can buy in. Whatever we do at this level, if the decision makers are not on board with us, we'll continue to struggle. And I think that's really where we're having a problem. We do not have everyone on board with us.
Yeah. And well, I'm going to just say to the delegates as well listening in, thank you. We're starting to get some questions coming in. Please use the Q&A. And I'm going to go to the audience here. We've got a couple of questions here. Nikesha Porter, I'm a seafarer, and when I come home, I don't get the chance to share my experience on a national platform so people can be educated about how life is on board. And I think that's quite a key thing here. It is about telling people about how good shipping is. Sherice said once she fell into it, that was it. Great. We all felt the same. I think the industry is amazing. So really, just as opening up the floor now, Mona, do you have any comments there on the question there?
Yes, I'd love to come in, because there have been some amazing statements, very, very important, that we, in many industries, we talk more amongst ourselves than really telling others who we are and what we do. And I really think I know many young women who would be very interested in hearing about opportunities and careers in the shipping industry, but the opportunities aren't created. Now, I need to create the opportunities on my part. I need to invite many of you amazing women to come and speak to my final year class. But I also think you need to go out there more. We all need to make a bigger thrust, and we need to start early. We need to stop trying to engage the students at the end of their academic life. We have to start from there in the primary level, and they have to see persons who look like themselves. I'm sorry, women who are like me, making progress, making money. That's an important thing these days for both the parents and the children. And so we really need to get out into the classes. And once the people want this, the government have to get on board, you know? So let's really get out there and get our craft in front of these young people.
I mean, there are some good initiatives. I mean, I came across one the other day, Adopt a Ship, and that's been used in some schools in Greece and in Cyprus, where a class will go on and they'll track a vessel on AIS or whatever, and they'll speak to the captain, and they'll track it as it's going on its trade routes, and they'll learn all about trade and the importance of bringing goods from one part of the world to another, etc. And they're putting it in a real life scenario. But I think it was either Evette or Hortense was saying earlier that it's not just, I've been to seafair and I go to sea for that. You're opening up a lot of opportunities for career progression ashore. Superintendency, class, there's even masters who've gone on to become lawyers. So you get master mariner lawyers as well, so lots of opportunities. Just looking at some of the other questions that come through here. As a woman who entered the maritime industry unexpectedly and has since cultivated a deep interest in maritime law, what guidance would you offer for successfully navigating and establishing a career in this field? That's to yourself, Sherice. What are your thoughts?
Finding the right role models is going to be very important for any young person wanting to get into the industry. Finding where the opportunities are. Equally, I mean, Professor mentioned just now the ability to actually do well financially. Where are those opportunities? I think the opportunities there are in the finance space, for example, where I am. In the environmental space. If you try to find a role model who can help you to navigate those, because it's not easy. It's not available anywhere. There's no blueprint for this. Find people who are in the industry. Find a role model. To be honest, I think we people like Vivian and myself need to get out there more to help people to navigate this particular area. I do think that there are barriers, though. There are barriers to women coming into this space. They're gender stereotypes. It's very much a male-dominated industry. We don't have lots of women role models available. I can't tell you how often people reach out to me to say, I've seen you on something. Will you be my mentor? And so having more female mentors in the space would help. There's very limited access to training and education for women. There's also a lot of discrimination and harassment of women. Again, Vivian mentioned, not seeing so many women in the navigation area and space. But some of that is because they're afraid to go on board ships. They're afraid. They get harassed. There's a lot of discrimination. And quite frankly, I just think that we just don't have enough in place to protect women on board ships and also within the careers.
So I attended a conference a year or so ago, and they had a speaker from Scorpio, and we were talking about the whole issue of attracting women into the industry and how to actually attract younger people into the industry. And he said the Scorpio were looking at a project to practically 75 to 80% man a ship with women. So you overcome that fear of the harassment, because 75% of the crew are women, and you know it's admirable to see the industry going down that route, but also shipping has got a lot to do to actually, you know, clean up its act in the way that it portrays itself out to the industry to attract in the young people. Coming on to Vivian, really, just, you know, what you're saying there about Arsenio, you know, and the view that he has on speaking on panels, also, and making sure that there are women on the panels. That's very good. I mean, one of the questions here we have is the IMO and the shipping industry in general doing enough to attract the right people? What are your thoughts? Say to the panelists, please butt in, stick your hand up if you want to add in. It's a free for all as well. So, but your thoughts, Vivian?
I think, you know, the IMO is doing a lot, but I think too there is need for the individual countries as well to take some leadership with respect to the sector. And, you know, we often speak about, you know, legislation and policy transformation, but from what I have observed in this industry, it is a very, I mean, Jamaica is probably one of the most advanced in terms of maritime legal and institutional infrastructure. But most of the Caribbean, we have very small maritime administrations that are not necessarily commanding the ears of their policymakers. And that makes the legal and institutional transformation that we speak of very, very difficult for every aspect of maritime, not just gender inclusion. We're talking about safety, education, labor laws, compliance. You know, there are some practical realities that we have to embrace if we have to actually come up with real solutions. Otherwise, we're going to be having the same conversations for the next 10 years, you know, which I've seen. So, you know, the IMO can do a lot, and it is doing a lot. But at the end of the day, the actual implementation and realization of this comes down to the will of the individual member states. And what more can the IMO do with respect to canvassing the will of individual member states? You know, some countries struggle to even have representation at the IMO because of how very small their delegations are. A complex task in saying what more can the IMO do, because some member states may be of the view that there is sufficient intervention. Others might be of the view that there's more to be done. And we all bring our perspectives based on where we stand. So, you know, from what I have seen, I think there's a lot of initiatives out there. There is need for uptake. There's need for, you know, even when the IMO is funding an event, sometimes you do not have some people within countries uptaking the opportunity to participate. So there's only so much the IMO can do without that commitment from the individual member state. But I think the real question is, how do you actually canvass maritime to a high-level policy focus in the individual member states? And not just maritime, but the individual components of maritime that need addressing by that member state. Not just for it to function as a maritime administration, but to be part of the maritime community and fraternity that is responsible for implementing the ideals and the standards of the maritime conventions. And it's a very tall order. We see it, you know, in the struggle within many of the countries to get the decision makers and the policy makers to understand the sector and be willing to be a transformative agent for the sector.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Vivian. Hortense, you've got your hand up. Yeah, your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. I'm in agreement with what Vivian just said, and I think we'll have to look at the issue of compliance. We have to look at the issue of linking it with the performance of the economy and show the link between shipping and the local economy as well as the global economy. And I think once you can get that buy-in to show the benefit to the local economy and why it's important to focus on the maritime aspect. For example, one in the small countries, One major accident in a port and the entire economy shuts down. So we have to be able to be front and center to show what can happen if we do not put these systems in place. What can happen if we do not have legislation in place, if we do not have policy in place, if we do not have government buying in place. And the point you mentioned earlier, which I think is something that we really need to give some attention to, insofar as women serving on board vessels, is to have that buy-in from shipping companies to reserve at least a 25% capacity for females on board. And I think that would change the dynamics on board. That would change the interests of more women coming into that profession, because there are benefits to be had. When you have a marine transportation degree, as I mentioned earlier, there are several areas of opportunities, both ashore and on board ships. So it's for us to, as I said, disconnect, to try and close the gap, and to create greater awareness amongst the governments to focus on the economy, because that's what's important to them more than anything else. The economy, and we show the impact, if we do not get it right, the devastating impact it can have on the local economy.
You see, you raise a valid point there, and I think, one of the effects of this is, if you look at the Filipino seafarers, they would spend a period of time at sea, they would then come ashore, they would then work in the ship owner offices or the ship management offices in Manila, be superintendents, have a very healthy career ashore and what have you. Because a lot of the companies now are wanting staff to move over and work out of Hamburg and other places like that, they can't attract the seafarers and the chief engineers into becoming superintendents. So they're then employing administrators who've never been to sea. And those administrators who are acting as superintendents are lacking the empathy of talking with the crews on board and understanding what needs to happen. But just one thing, Hortense, I'm going to bring you in on, and then also Evette and Sherice. We're talking here about a mindset change, but the shipping industry has even struggled to get cadet berths on board ships. We're facing shortages all the time, and and ship owners won't even put cadet berths on board. So, how can we force that mindset change? Let me come to you then, Sherice, and maybe touch on that point about whether the IMO and the shipping industry are doing enough to attract in the right people. But give me your thoughts.
Thank you, Sean. And this is where the obligation is clear in my mind. I saw one of our attendees is a colleague of mine saying, mentorship doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And I agree. One of the things that WEMAC has done as a protege of the IMO is we have had continued interaction with we recognize, I want to say this correctly because I don't want it to sound token. We recognize that the persons who make up our association are from the industry, but they are from different spaces in the industry. And so amongst the calls that we have made that have been honored by the industry is for bodies, organized bodies like the Caribbean Shipping Association and the Port Management Association of the Caribbean come on board with us, and we have signed off MOUs. Now, at the risk of just speaking to what is most current in my mind, with the CSA, we entered into a WEMAC CSA mentorship program. What was that? It was recognition that entry career women would need a hand from women who have been at the table for a while. We know, for example, that we need to, as Professor Weber said earlier, scaffold women who are entering into thoughts about career. So we have a student chapter, and I'm taking the long route because one of the mandates of the student chapter in the CMU is to start a club in one of the primary schools near to us, a maritime club, to get the young people thinking about the sea. But in where we are with CSA, we took a risk and we decided to put our collective monies behind a mentorship program. We got a mentor program manager. We had three pairs of people across the region talking to each other for a 6-week period, but the program manager trained the mentors coached the mentees, saw them work together for 6 weeks, and then stepped them off into continued relationship with a little bit more skill on the part of the mentees and a little bit more empathy on the part of the mentors. One of those peers and our program manager is now at the CSA conference talking about the success of that. If we could multiply that effect, talk about the butterfly effect. We believe that we start small, but we keep moving until it spreads. If we could have more people jumping on board, Sean, then we will have action becomes what Malcolm Gladwell calls the tipping point. Change must come. But we have to consistently work at what seems like the small things until we get there. Information is also key. So I see a person asking, how do I become a maritime lawyer? When we had one of our more prestigious, and I say that very guidedly, girls' school in Jamaica come to the CMU, we told them you can go to the University of the West Indies, Mona, and do that law degree, or you can go to Barbados or wherever. But when you're finished, did you know that you can now specialize as a maritime lawyer? Sherice just said it without even, so you don't have to go and do the degree at IMLE. In fact, that's a graduate degree. What are you doing now? Let's step off from where you are. So information and education is going to be very important. I started as a teacher of English, so I know what I'm saying. My journey here is serendipitous. I came because I loved education, but I had to hit the ground running and I had to learn hard and spend hours doing the IMO free courses, Vivian, to get into an understanding of the industry. So nothing is handed to us on a silver platter, but once we are willing to work and there are people who are willing to step off, then it is our obligation now to give them the stepping stones into where we are. So education and people making themselves available to show others the way amongst us women.
Sherice, can I get your views on what Evette has just said, but also Caroline has put on the Q&A, touching really on what we're saying here. What about training for potential mentors? We speak a lot about mentorship, but it does not come naturally to many people, and that's true. How to be a mentor. It's sad to say that sometimes we create the barriers, but Sherice, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I'll start off with how do we encourage shipping companies to make more opportunities available, and I'll come on to the mentorship point. Shipping companies are like every other company. They owe duties to their shareholders. They need to make money. So providing financial incentives and subsidies, and this would really be government-led, really. Some kind of incentives would actually help shipping companies to create these opportunities. They're not going to do it on their own if it's going to take away from them, unless we provide them with some kind of rewards, some kind of recognition. Companies do things for very specific reasons. I'm actually going to make money. There are going to be some kind of financial incentives. I'm going to get some subsidies. I'm going to get some kind of industry recognition or award for it. I'm participating in a program that's recognized for partnerships with educational institutions. If you have institutional educations like Caribbean Maritime University entering into partnerships with shipping companies, again, these kinds of things provide incentives to shipping companies to create opportunities for young people, cadets, etc. But they're not going to do it on their own unless there's something in it for them. And so it goes back to the points that everyone has been making, which is working with the governments, working with industry organizations. Organizations like WEMAC and WISTA really do have mentorship programs available. It is the mission. We have it as our mission to create opportunities, to create networking opportunities, to create mentorship opportunities for women in the industry. It is. We see it as our role. It is going to be very important for people like us who have already established ourselves in the industry to stretch our hands backwards, to reach out to other people, to bring them forward. And I think it's going to be important, for governments in the region to give us support in this, to allow their people to participate. One of the challenges that we have in WEMAC is who's going to pay for membership? Many of the women in WEMAC are actually public sector workers. They work for the ports, they work for the maritime authorities. They're not working necessarily for private sector. We need the government to actually provide support, whether it's financial support to allow the ladies to attend. Vivian was talking about the fact that, IMO has all of these initiatives, but people don't actually attend. Why? A lot of the barriers actually is financial. We have nobody to pay for us to attend. There's nobody willing to put their money where their mouth is. The governments are very happy to talk about, supporting women, bringing young people, forward, bring them on board. But when it comes down to it, nobody's willing to pay for it. They're not willing to put forward the scholarships. They're not willing to pay for the opportunities for people to attend the IMO seminars or to attend some of the conferences where we get to speak to our colleagues in the industry, or to pay for young people to attend. I attended a seminar quite recently, and I made the point that there were no young people from any schools here. Why? Because nobody wanted to pay for the additional spaces for the students to attend. When you have in events, it's one thing for all of us to sit down and talk to each other. We speak into the choir. If we don't start to bring students to our events, they have no idea what opportunities are available. They don't get to know any of us, and so the opportunity is completely lost.
Vivian, you got your hand up. Get your thoughts. And then I'm going to talk to Mona about the impact of all of this on management of the oceans. I want to get your view on that in a second, Mona. But Vivian, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to address some of the contributions from Sherice, which are all very valid. But my statement with respect to the participation, these are IMO funded opportunities in terms of the financing, that there is little uptake sometimes. And in some instances, the member states do not uptake the opportunity, even when the IMO is paying for it. So again, that comes into the awareness and the sensitivity of the government to the opportunity that has been foregone with this, paid opportunity. And I also think in terms of the opportunities, because I think the biggest challenge is female participation, particularly in the seafaring arm of the sector, because you have a fair amount of representation in the shore-based sector. But when it comes to the seafaring, that's where the real intricacies come in. And the bargaining opportunities for the cadetships, it requires industry insight, because so many times you approach the shipping companies and they say, oh, well, we don't handle cadetships. It's our company in Singapore or London that handles that. And then you get stonewalled because you have to find your way through. How do you actually hold somebody within that company that is not even remotely connected to your country? So it takes an understanding of the ship owners, the charterers, and being able to leverage that connection with whatever they have with your country to be able to get those spaces. Because we've seen success where universities have leveraged that connection to get access to training spaces, but limited access because maybe there might be a fossil fuel resource within your country. So you can leverage a charterer's access to that resource to take on some cadets. But it takes insight into the operation of crewing and manning to be able to successfully negotiate these positions. And I think this is also where the education and awareness needs to focus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vivian. Mona, let me come on to you, just really looking at the sort of ocean management, and I think this is important and this is relevant really to the work of the IMO. But are we taking management of the ocean seriously enough, do you think, within the industry? I mean, you touched on it earlier when you were chatting about it, but what can be done more at international level? Because it's a big issue. Trade is continuing, all the rest of it. But when we look at the responsibility we have to the effective management of our oceans, is enough being done? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a lot that needs to be done in terms of really letting persons understand that the seas are more than just a mass of water that provides upthrust and through buoyancy supports shipping. Evette touched on it when she said we need more persons to realize the importance of having clean seas, of having the oceans preserved, and as you asked, properly managed. So management now has to deal with the major issues that we're facing globally. We have to deal with the issues of climate change. We have to deal with the issues of marine pollution. And these issues, I think, should be at the forefront of the shipping industry and the maritime associations. I mean, shipping is huge business. 80% of our trade is moved through shipping. And it amazes me when I hear about funding being a problem. I think in this industry, we need to tap into our resources and literally be willing to put our money where our mouth is. there are other private sector organizations that have foundations. And these foundations reach out to young people with scholarships. They reach out to all levels. They're in the public view for their attention to reducing plastic pollution and for their attention to dealing with ecosystem restoration and for their attention to helping with ocean management. Why wouldn't the Shipping Association be leading in that regard? I cannot think of a foundation that is directly related to a shipping association. And so because we need to tackle the major issues that are affecting this ocean on which all of this shipping and trade and so on rests, we really need to attract young people. And we really need to attract persons who have an interest. So if you're a marine biology student, if you're already in that space, you're interested in the sea, you are probably very fired up about how to get into marine and other related activities. And so those persons need to be engaged. The management of our marine resources are very, very much in the public view right now. Young people are fired up about making a difference and making those resources, putting them in a better position based on the threats they face. And so the threats of reducing, for example, the transport of stowaways, threats related to biodiversity loss, threats related to how we handle ballast water. All those are interesting areas and areas that young people would get fired up about. And so there is a link. If you can provide those linkages of how my interests and my passions can be associated with a huge industry like this, and how we can help improve the ocean systems for our survival, for our daily lives, I think we will attract and we will overcome some of these barriers.
I think you're right, though, Mona. I think the younger generation are more attuned into the importance of protecting the environment and emissions and ecology and what have you. They seem to be more attuned into that, and whether they're going to force change. I want to sort of just talk a little bit about then finally, because we've been chatting away for over an hour and nearly an hour and 10 minutes now, but coming back to the issue of diversity, how important it is for Jamaica. Now, Jamaica plays a very key role at the IMO, the IMO Council, and chaired the SDW subcommittee in the past with Admiral Brady. But how important is diversity for Jamaica and the way Jamaica works within the IMO? And what is the sort of situation in the Caribbean in general, and what are the opportunities there that we have? Vivian, do you want to kick that off, and then I'll invite everybody else to come in, probably be the last question of today. And then I've got a couple of one Q&A that I'll maybe field as well. But Vivian, over to you.
I can't speak for Jamaica, but I have observed Jamaica and of course been I have very much admired their progress with respect to both regulation and administration of the maritime sector. The rest of the Caribbean has a long way to go. I don't know if they have the resources to be able to make the same strides. So I think Jamaica has a role as a mentor and possible enabler to assist the Caribbean in compliance and in progressing the maritime sector. And I believe if the member states of the Caribbean looks to Jamaica for that, Jamaica could be a very good model, and not just a model. I think Jamaica also has the opportunity to lend expertise to the region with respect to STCW in particular. I mean, it remains the only maritime administration with a full operational whitelisted compliance with respect to STCW. Yeah. You know, Trinidad and Tobago, we have officer training, but the country pays an exorbitant amount for the UKMCA to approve its programs and its short courses and all of those things. So for the countries that are interested in setting up maritime education centers, etc., Jamaica has played a role in the past in terms of overseeing and lending its support and its approvals where compliance has been done. So I think it's for the region to understand what talent there is and what institutional capacity that exists within the region, and to agree on an approach that the IMO can assist in facilitating to build and to share the capacity that exists within the region. So Jamaica has a great space and a great model for the region to follow, but I doubt that most of the member states will have the capacity to both either justify the infrastructure. When I say the infrastructure, I don't just mean the building, but the human resource infrastructure that is required to really fully comply with all the mandatory conventions. So I think there is room there for Jamaica to be a big brother for the region in terms of facilitating compliance with the IMO conventions.
Okay, thank you very much. Evette, can I bring you in? We haven't heard from you for a couple of minutes, but just your thoughts there on the role of Jamaica within the IMO regarding diversity, but the situation regarding diversity in the Caribbean and what are the opportunities? What's your sort of overarching thoughts on that?
Thank you, Sean. And these are very careful thoughts because I am, after all, affiliated to the METI, the Maritime Education and Training Institute, and not to the MARAD, as in the MAJ. But I can speak from where we are as Jamaica. Vivian just said something, and I want to say first, Sean, I cannot forget this. Admiral Brady, served as the first and sustained director of our MARAD for a while. But late last year, he demitted office, and our new director of maritime business in Jamaica is Mr. Bertrand Smith, another legal luminary. So I don't know if it's fortuitous that there is a policy crafter at the helm at this time, because amongst the spaces that we see us leading in, with Mr. Smith at the helm, is to craft some policies that will guide us and probably make representation to a very supportive ministry,
which is that
government ministry, about probably what can be legislated, not just regulated.
Several years ago,
we note, as Vivian said, that amongst the countries of the region, and I defer to Dr. Ross, to Hortense, my friend, on this one, we are still the country which can safely and properly issue those certificates of competencies that are portable for the world. And so probably one of the things we do need, Sean, is to take a kind of lead as the IMO guides us to be the certification space for the rest of the Caribbean, so that Trinidad doesn't pay all that money to England, pay some of it to us. But respectfully, we can certify our own Caribbean nationals
as a jurisdiction, as a country, the government,
not just the near coastal movement that we need to do across the Caribbean, but in proper seafaring certification. So we have certification, and
they took a decision and they went
we
after it,
are the space that holds
the fruits of that now.
Several of the secretariats.
From just
so
looking at them,
we have the Caribbean Memorandum of Understanding here. We house the Secretariat for the Women in Maritime Association Caribbean. And there are other spaces that are not coming ready to mind. So we do have the opportunity to offer a synergistic space and to craft synergistic relationships that will kick off not just change, but continued work. And we are a good crossways between Miami and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. So we are easy to get to and go from. So the geographic space, the relationship space, and also the education and training space is a spot that we want to work from to make more waves, because we have been making change. We spoke here about the obligation and the opportunity, and we have to underscore, all of us, that we have come a long way. Remember that old Virginia Slims ad, "You've come a long way, baby." We have come a long way. We are making waves, and we do want to just catch that wind and continue. And so we can train, but we do have one of the things we have in the Caribbean, Sean, is that we're an amazing space for training. We have per capita, we are dense with maritime education and training institutions, along with training of the ilk that is offered with larger and more diversified institutions like University of the West Indies, which is at Mona and St. Augustine. But we have UTT Shagaranas, we have the CMU, we have in the Bahamas, the LJM Maritime Institute. We go down to Guyana and we have the AA, what they call themselves, I can't remember, forgive me, but we have Marine down there, and we are training them. So we should be doing more because we have room to take on the whole space. Even the University of the Virgin Islands does its own kind of training in what we're talking about today, from marine sciences to people taking on the high seas. So we can lead in training, policy, and of course we have the warm sunshine of the Caribbean to do that relationship, because when we recognize that the same thing that divides us, that ocean, is the same thing that sews us together, and we start to do it for us, then we are working on our own sustained viability. And it's not them and us, it's just we, and we are in different places. So those three things: relationship, training, certification, and policy that we can share.
Thank you very much, Evette. Hortense, do you have anything to add to the discussion there about the role of the role of Jamaica and the way that Jamaica works within the IMO?
Thank you very much. Just to say, I endorse everything that Dr. Johnson just said. Just to say that we're a beacon in the Caribbean for maritime excellence, and our graduates are well recognized and sought after globally. So in terms of being a center to endorse certification, I fully support that as an initiative going forward. And I'm very proud to say you have Jamaicans serving on ships across the globe. And even the latest development is that Jamaican seafarers are well sought after in the pleasure craft industry as well. And that's a growing business for us.
Well, I just before we finish, and just wanted to we got a quote here or a comment here from Caroline. Actually, now where are we? I think you've just answered it, actually, Evette, haven't you? Are you probably talking about there are certain programs within the MAJ to actually, is it Sherice? Do you want to add your hand up? Well, thank you very, very much, ladies, for your time today. Again, superb debate and discussion. A lot of areas of the topic that we've covered as well, and good input as well from our delegates. The webinars that we hold with the Maritime Authority of Jamaica are very well researched and very well planned, and we end up with some excellent discussions and debates as we have done today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to Bertram and the team there, and Karen Mullins at MAJ for the hard work that they put in putting it together, and also with Debbie and our team as well. It's been excellent. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. The debate event today has been videotaped, so we will be editing it, and it will be put onto the Ship Management International website, and will be sent over to the MAJ and put on their website as well. But thank you very much indeed for your time today, and to the delegates. It's been an excellent debate. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you very much.